Okay, ladies and gentlemen, sorry for the delay. I think I managed to figure out our technological issues. Yeah, okay, I think we're there. So, welcome to all of you to our final Q&A session before the end of the 2024-2026 Euroculture intake. Let me start off this session by wishing you all a happy new year, and I hope you all had pleasant holidays. I understand that for many of you this will be a session that is going to be close to the deadline. Most of you will have been familiarizing yourself with the program over the last couple of months, so I want to stay away from introducing the program to you too much and try to give a little bit more time on, answering your questions. So I will do a quick presentation on some particular elements of the program that I think are important, but afterwards I want to go into your questions a little bit faster. So because I can imagine that with the deadline being in 2 days, many of you will have questions to ask or final confirmations or things you want to check on. So if you have any questions, anything that you want to answer, just feel free to start putting those things in the chat right now, and then I will answer them as we go. I hope that sounds good, and with that I think I will just get started. Maybe it's good to know, for those of you who haven't been joining in for the last couple of sessions, my name is Jelmer. I'm the Euroculture coordinator with the University of Groningen, and I'm also coordinator partly of the entire Euroculture network, so that is why I am doing these sessions, and I'm joining you today from the Netherlands as well. Alright, so that's all. Let me just start with kind of the basics of the program very quickly. So, as you well know at this point, probably Euroculture is an Erasmus Mundus program in European studies, meaning that we are able to offer the Erasmus Mundus scholarship for this intake. We have the Erasmus Mundus status. We are a program in the arts in European studies, meaning that we, as I will go into, cover the continent of Europe from a variety of arts-related, humanities-related disciplines. Oh, okay, I see some interaction in the chat already, so nice to see you. Mohammed Ramzan Shaikh and Narin, nice to see you. I will get to your questions in a minute. We will go over this in more detail in a second. So just kind of to go back to the basics, we're an interdisciplinary European studies program. We are small scale in that each of our different universities has a group of between, let's say, 5 to 25 students at any given time in one university, so you're never in bigger groups than that, giving you more time to develop relationship with students as well as staffs. So you have more time to get to know and build relationships with people. Additionally, the program is 120 ECTS, meaning that it is 2 years. That's, for those of you not familiar with the European credit transfer system, approximately 30 credits per semester would constitute full workload for that semester. So 30 plus 30 plus 30 plus 30 is 120. So each semester you do 30 credits. So the workload is more or less evenly distributed throughout those 4 semesters. And finally, of course, Euroculture is fully English taught, so it's taught in many different European countries and also 4 non-European countries partly as well. But in all of those institutions, the language of instruction is English, so you will always be taught in English, and English is the only language that you are required to be proficient in order to participate in the program. As I alluded to before, Euroculture is organized as a European network or as a consortium. So there are multiple different universities that organize this program together. That's more or less the idea. Finally, we are an Erasmus Mundus joint master program. So that means that we offer the scholarship, but also that we are a joint master. And a joint master means that you get a diploma from 2 different universities together. I want to separate the matter of a joint degree from the matter of a double degree. A double degree is a degree that is basically two separate diplomas from two different institutions, so you're following two programs at once and you get two diplomas at the end. That's not the case for Euroculture. Euroculture is a joint degree, which means two universities come together to offer you one diploma. So you receive one master level diploma at the end of Euroculture, just to make sure that that's clear. Euroculture is considered to be a Master of Excellence and a flagship program in the European context. What does it mean to be a flagship program? Basically that Euroculture is quite an experienced Erasmus Mundus program that's been around for quite a long time. We've celebrated our 25th anniversary in 2023. So with that comes a lot of experience, meaning that other Erasmus Mundus programs or other similar programs to us tend to look to us for input or feedback on how they might want to run their program. So what we mean by flagship program is a program that is experienced and knows what it's doing in this context and can provide input to other programs as well. We're also a Master of Excellence that's related to the Erasmus Mundus label, meaning that we provide high quality education at all of our European partner universities. You could say also that we receive very positive alumni evaluations. So in 2023, Euroculture was noted as the top-rated European Studies program in the entire Netherlands, so #1 in the entire country, based on the feedback that we receive from our students. So what we generally see is that students really enjoy their time with us and that they generally find the program to be valuable in a variety of different ways. We also have quite a strong reputation with employers, meaning that Euroculture students tend to be known quite well as students that are reliable, students that are good workers, and as such they build good reputations within the organizations that they work with, which then again makes the program itself in turn more interesting for future employers. We often get emails from employers asking us, well, hey, we had an intern from your program. Would you maybe have another student available next year? We get emails from organizations all the time wanting to maybe collaborate with us on these kinds of things. So Euroculture has a strong reputation with employers, and that again might help you in your professional career as well. What do you need as a background in order to study Euroculture? This is always kind of a complex question because there's a lot of different ways of interpreting what constitutes a relevant background based on, let's say, the academic culture. In some countries, for example, economics is seen as a social science, whereas in other nationalities it might be seen as an entirely separate department or faculty. So that's just one example of how complicated it can be to determine what a relevant background is. But the general principle is that Euroculture is an arts, humanities, and social sciences program, meaning that you need to have a background in those disciplines at the bachelor level in order to be eligible to join. What that means is more or less the list that you can see on the screen right now. Do note though that this is not an exhaustive list, meaning that there might be disciplines that aren't shown here exactly that might still work for you. If you're unsure if you have the relevant background to do this program, write us an email. I know due to the holidays that it might be difficult for us to get back to all of you as quickly as possible, but I will try to get back to your emails as soon as I can. But generally speaking, this is a list of backgrounds that our students tend to come from. So economics, business, these backgrounds are very much edge cases that generally we would say are not considered to be eligible. However, in some cases where you have relevant courses or relevant minors or relevant work experience alongside it, we might still consider them those kinds of backgrounds as well. But do note, however, that generally speaking, we are really looking for arts, culture, social sciences, humanities related programs for people to join. And then again, as you will see, in a minute here is that's a long list of different programs. So how can you, let's say, how can all of those programs be relevant at one-to-one program? And that's because Euroculture is a highly interdisciplinary master program. What I mean by that is Euroculture approaches the topic of European studies from a multitude of different academic disciplines. This overview is not exhaustive. It's rather to give you kind of an indication of the kinds of things that are covered in Euroculture. But what you might say in Euroculture is that it exists at the intersection of history, of arts and culture, of languages, and of international politics. These are kind of the four different elements that are recurring throughout Euroculture, is that adopting these kinds of lenses of analysis are generally what you will be doing throughout your Euroculture studies. So basically, how does that work in practice? I think I'll skip forward a little bit here. Also because I want to get to the questions a bit quicker as well. In Euroculture, let's see if I can find the right slide for this for semester 1. Yes, semester 1 is a good example of this. In Euroculture, you will find that you'll have courses on many different academic disciplines, or rather that ask questions that relate to many different academic disciplines. You could say that the main question we tried to ask in Euroculture, what is the role of Europe in today's interdisciplinary, globalized, and increasingly internationalized world? That's one way of formulating the question. And that question is then asked from a variety of different academic disciplines. So let's take an example. One of you might be a history student. You might be used to doing history as a kind of way of approaching academia. So you've written history papers before, you've maybe written a bachelor thesis on a history-related subject matter. How does that help you in this interdisciplinary setting? Well, the idea is that Euroculture, in a small-scale interdisciplinary classroom, brings you together with students from other academic disciplines. And basically by putting you in a group together, by making you work together, by giving you assignments, asking these kinds of questions, that you then expand your academic knowledge into other domains based on your interests and based kind of on the constitution of the group itself. So in some way, you could say that it is the students themselves that inform the subject matter of the program. This is also because the mode of assignment, the mode of assessment in the program is a lot of group work, a lot of papers, a lot of presentations, a lot of assignments that allow you to customize more or less the result in a direction that is more interesting to you. Right. So that's more or less the point I wanted to make. It's an interdisciplinary program, and that interdisciplinarity is reflected in each semester and in the way the program is constructed as well. In semester 1, that's maybe more concretely, this means you'll have a course on a critical course, let's say. So that's something that I want to stress importantly, is that Euroculture adopts a very critical approach on the subject matter of European studies. So you have a critical reflection on the history and development of European culture, of European cultural institutions. There is a course on the history of European politics, especially in the more contemporary post-World War II context. So, for example, more concretely speaking, how did the European Union develop? How do their institutions work? Why are the institutions the way that they are? Who were instrumental in building these things up? But also critically challenging why particular institutions are the way they are, what might be improved about them, what works, what doesn't work. These kinds of questions are also asked as part of that course. And of course, there is also a course that is more specifically focused on the history of the European continent as a whole. Is there such a thing as European identity and European shared collective history? What does it mean for there to be such a thing, and how would that impact our situation today? So again, that's it's also about critically challenging existing historical narratives about Europe. What does it mean for Europe to be, let's say you could say the Enlightenment narrative? What are these things meaning today? How relevant are they? How do they play into today's discourses? That's more or less the idea in the first semesters, to critically assess these different, let's say, to critically assess Europe from these different academic disciplines. And of course, each semester you'll find that there are Eurocompetence modules, and the Eurocompetence modules are there to build transferable and foundational skills. So for example, Eurocompetence 1 focuses more on academic skills such as citation, presentation, general paper writing, how to cite in Chicago style, for example. These are the kinds of things that you want to focus on during Eurocompetence 1. I think actually I want to mostly skip through the content of the presentation now. I want to just focus on the questions a bit more, also because we don't have I don't want to spend as much time on this, because most of you will have already submitted your application. You will know a lot of these things already. So I want to just focus on the benefits of what it would mean if you were accepted and if you wanted to join the program. And then afterwards, I'll just start the Q&A and you can ask your questions and I'll go through all of them. So maybe first of all, the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. How does it work? What does it do for you if you get it? So first of all, the Erasmus Mundus scholarship will give you 24 installments for living costs of 1,000 euros each month, which usually means that in most of the European countries you can go to, you can live without needing to work, and basically you don't need to do any additional work to study there. As part of the Erasmus Mundus scholarship, all your tuition fees are covered as well, so you don't need to pay any tuition fees to the university. Depending on where you come from, you might also receive compensation for your travel costs. Basically, the principle is the further away you are from your destination country, the more you will receive. The exact amounts will vary, so I won't go over the exact details now. And also, there is some compensation for installation in the EU. Additionally, things to note if you receive the Erasmus Mundus scholarship: your first and second semester destinations will be set in advance of the start of the program. They will be written up as part of your scholarship contract and they are set in advance. This is different from self-financing applications where only the first semester is set before your program begins. So that's one difference there. This has to be done for various legal and practical reasons. We will try to account for your preferences. So if you've submitted your application, you will have seen you needed to submit 3 preferences for universities that you're interested in. That's correct. That's fine. We will try to give you the universities you prefer the most. However, of course, that might not always be possible if one university is more popular than others. In those cases, we will, in some cases, have to change your preferences or change the universities you attend in order to ensure balance in the network. Generally speaking, though, we really try to make sure that you at least get the first university of your choice as part of the offer. So that's really something that we try to focus on really hard, is to make sure that you get at least one of those universities for sure. So that's not a guarantee, but that's something that we try to do very much. So that's something you can probably assume is the case. Additionally, the scholarship also provides you with insurance. Oh, hi Eunice, good to see you again. Hi. The Euroculture program so provides insurance. That's health insurance. That's, I think, also includes a basic liability insurance as well. The exact details of that will be provided as part of a certificate that you will receive before the program. This insurance is mandatory for all scholarship students, even the European ones. That's something we have to provide. Yes. Let's see. So as you know, of course, if you're applying by today or by the 10th, that means that you also need to hold your diploma by that date. I maybe want to take a second explaining why that's the case. We need students to hold their degree by January 10 so that we know for sure that they will be able to start in September. We've had cases in the past where we allowed students to join even though they did not have their diploma yet, because they said, oh, well, Jelmer or whoever the coordinator was, I only need to finish one more course. Surely I'll graduate before September. And we said, fine. So we prepared the documents. And then at the end, it turns out that they never finished the course and they couldn't start. And that means that the scholarship was lost, because then, well, you can't start. And we would have liked to give that scholarship to somebody else that now isn't able to get it. So we are not taking chances on that anymore. And that's really the reason why we say you need to hold your degree by the deadline, because we want to make sure that you are ready to start in September by the time that we start going through this process with you. Also because the visa, the practical elements of getting started with your degree in Europe, that will take time to arrange. So because that takes time, we want to make sure that everything is in order beforehand. So that's the main reason why we do this. Another reason why is the application window between October and January. That's partly because of legal reasons. Erasmus Mundus programs have to be open for a specific amount of time in the year, and this is more or less the only possible time frame that works for us. So, and it has to do with a billion different administrative reasons, but that's the idea. So that's why January 10. If we find that you cannot receive the scholarship for one reason or another, but we still think that you are a suitable student to join Euroculture as a self-financing student, we will always just invite you to the program. So when we communicate the selection result to you and we think, well, sorry, there isn't a scholarship available for you this year. If we still think that you meet the minimum criteria to join, you will receive an invitation email from us saying, well, congratulations, you can still join as a self-financing student. We would love to have you, but we just don't have a scholarship available for you this year. So that's automatically done. You don't need to worry about that. If you're not interested in joining as a self-financing student, you can tell us, and then so be it. So that's something I wanted to say. Yes. So there's one more point here on notes, geographical diversity in the selection process. So what does that mean? So the Erasmus Mundus project and the way it's set up and financed requires us as programs, so all Erasmus Mundus programs need to do this, they need to account for a set of geographical diversity in the selection, which means essentially, Erasmus Mundus has divided the entire world into a series of different geographical windows, you might call them. And we can select students from a variety of them or target students preferentially from particular regions. For some of them. So not all scholarships are part of these windows. There are also, I think, more than half of the scholarships that we have available are entirely based on who has the highest score, and we don't really look that much at nationality. So it's in that sense, geographical diversity comes into it in some ways, but in other ways, the most highest scoring students also receive the scholarship. Nevertheless, though, only students that score quite highly are able to receive the scholarship. So even if you are from, let's say, one geographical window might be Western Balkans, for example. The Western Balkans is a geographical window. If you are from that particular region, you are competing with students from that particular region for a scholarship, and usually we have enough applicants from that region or most of the other geographical regions as well, that there is still an element of competition there. So you still need to score quite highly in order to apply for the scholarship overall. So that's something to keep in mind. I think I don't really need to tell you how to apply because you've all just done it. I hope you submitted all the documents. I hope everything worked for you. Maybe this is another thing. If you have feedback on the application process, if you have things that you found difficult, or if you have things that would benefit from further explanation on the website, for example, this is also a good forum to just tell me, because I can make a note of it and then also improve that for the future. So if you have any notes or feedback on how you think the application process went for you, I'd also be quite happy to chat with you about that. So if you have comments, please also leave them here. So I will not go into the how to apply too much. I think the tuition fees are pretty clear. It's also on the website, but okay. You know what? From here on out, I think it's best if we just go through the things that you find interesting. So I will just answer your questions, and we will sort of hopefully flexibly go through some of these different domains as we go through them. So I will just close the presentation now and put my face up on the big screen. There we go. Let's see. So I will just go through the questions, starting with the oldest question first. So Naren asked, please mention the timetable for each semester. So with timetable, I assume more or less that you mean the end dates and the start dates of each semester. So that's a good question. Most European universities start in early September. But there are some exceptions to that, and that's Krakow, Udine, and Göttingen. Those three universities would start closer to the end of September or October. The first semester lasts from September until usually around the end of January. In Groningen, and I think Groningen is not the only one, we would usually have classes that require your physical attendance until Christmas. So before Christmas we stop with our courses. So from September until December there's coursework, and then we have the Christmas break as we just had them. And now, for example, the students that started last year, they now have to finish a few assignments, but we don't ask them to come back physically to Groningen to do that. So they can submit their final assignments online, because many of you, for example, might want to head home for the holidays to your home country. That's fine. You can just submit your assignments from home afterwards. Of course, after that, the second semester will start. Usually speaking, the semester number 2 will start around February. Unless, of course, we're talking about Krakow, Göttingen, and Udine again. Because those universities, again, they start later, so they end later as well. In those cases, what that means is you also start later in your second semester. So depending on how your first semester and your second semester work together, you might have quite a bit of time between them, so maybe even like a month of nothing, or just like maybe a week. So plan for that accordingly, keep that in mind. We will talk about this when you start the program as well, so it's something that will come up after you start your studies. But what I will say is all combinations of universities are possible. There is never overlap between semesters. However, in some cases there is less time or more time between the semesters. Yes, I hope that answers your question. And for the second year, it's mostly the same as the first year. You start in September, end in January, and then in February, I think for the fourth semester it's March. It's a bit later, but that's more or less the time. So from September to December for semester 1, and from February to June, July for semester 2. And then there's the summer break, of course, in between semester 2 and semester 1 of the next year, so semester 3. Mohammed Ramzan says, I've applied for the program, I'm very much excited. That's great, wonderful. Wishing you all the best with your result. Let's hope we get to see you in September. Hi Boris, nice to see you. Indeed, great that you're here. Naren, when is the deadline? Tomorrow or January 10 at 23:59? That's a good question. We close the application window at the end of January 10th. So you do have the entirety of January 10 as well to submit your application. So basically, as soon as it is past midnight on January 10, so as soon as it becomes January 11, the application window closes. How this works in practice, we will log the moment that your application was submitted. If it was before the end of January 10, then you're fine. If it's afterwards, then you are not considered for the scholarship. So this is a strict deadline. If you submit after January 10, then we won't consider you for the scholarship. You will only be considered as a self-financing student. So we will still look at your application. So if you, want to see how well you might have done, if you were eligible at all, that's maybe to keep in mind there. Mohammed Ramzan Sheikh, I have a couple of questions. One, is there any age limit? Two, what is the interview mostly about after one gets shortlisted? Okay, interesting question. So first of all, is there any age limit? No, there is no age limit. However, if you are really past what we would consider a usual student age, so if you're maybe like 40 or above 40, we might ask some extra questions. We might have an interview with you, maybe just asking for your motivation, because usually people above that age will have a lot of work experience. They can still be accepted into the program, but we want to make sure that they have the right motivation to finish the program with us. So no, there is no age limit, but if you are a little bit older, then we will have to ask you some questions about that and maybe just see, why do you want to study this program now? What do you think is the added value for you? Do you think you'll be able to finish? Are you working alongside it? So these are the kinds of questions that we would like to ask, also to make sure that they have the right expectations of what the program is going to be for them. But there is no real age limit. Two, what is the interview mostly about after one gets shortlisted? So we have no interviews. There is no interview as part of the selection procedure. We look at your profile based on what's submitted in your application, and based on that, a ranking list will be established. And that ranking list is what determines who gets the scholarships. We would like to do interviews, but there's just not enough time for that because we have a lot of applicants and we don't have the chance to interview them all. I'm sorry. But of course, I would love to be able to talk to all of you, but I don't think we just don't have the time in practice. I hope that answers that question. Yosra asks, how many... Oh, sorry, that was not the first question. Are there any universities that are more popular than the others? So I would say there are differences in popularity, but that's also not necessarily popularity because the universities are better or worse, but more so just how well known they are. So you might say the universities of Strasbourg, Göttingen, and Groningen are quite well known. They are all top 100 universities, if I'm not mistaken, all of them are. They have Nobel Prize winners, which is for a lot of different, in some nationalities, that's a very important criterion for determining if a university is good or not. So I would say that Göttingen, Groningen, Strasbourg, those are the three universities that tend to be applied to a bit more. However, if you want to talk about how good the experience is at all of the different universities, I want to always shout out Olomouc, because Olomouc, although it's kind of usually not necessarily on people's radar so much, it's a very good university, it's a very nice city, and one thing that's a very good benefit compared to some of the others is that it's quite affordable. Living costs in the Czech Republic are quite a bit lower than they are in other parts of Europe. The same kind of goes for Poland as well. While still providing you with like a very good educational experience. The team in those places the teams in Olomouc and Krakow, where the living costs are a bit lower, are still excellent, are still very good. So I would say there are some universities that are more popular than others, but not necessarily for academic reasons. So I would definitely recommend to broaden your horizons a bit if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous. Olomouc, Krakow, Udine, some of the universities that are a bit smaller, they are still very good, and I think applying to them will just give you a great experience as well, maybe just outside what you might normally expect of a university compared to in terms of, what's on your radar. So Western Europe tends to be on people's radars a bit more, for whatever reason. Hope that answers your question. Isabella asks, I have a question about the reference letters. I chose the option that my lecturer will send my reference letter via email. How is the process so that I can guide her? Is she going to get a link? So Isabella, that's a good question. As soon as you submit your application, the referee will get an email request. So basically you have to submit their email. As you will see above in that section, as soon as you submit the application, a message will automatically be sent to that email address. Dear Professor so-and-so, or dear Sir, Madam, student, in this case Isabella Alves, has asked that you submit a reference letter to this and this address. Please do so. And then we also provide them with instructions already. But the main instructions should already kind of be clear from what is on the website. They need to be official in a various different number of ways, and they need to be submitted either in the tool or by email to euroculture@rug.nl. If you're not sure who to address it to exactly, you can address the letter to the admissions board of the Euroculture program. So the admissions board of the Euroculture program. That's the what you might say is the general address. But it doesn't matter a lot, but that's maybe a way to make it a little bit more official. Yes, we would prefer PDFs. They can be digitally signed, physically signed, as long as they are signed and as long as they meet all the formal criteria. If your organization that you're asking for does not have a stamp, then you don't have to provide it. But if it does, then you should try to do it. It needs to be official. We need to be able to verify that the letter is official. Okay, Naren asks, I've heard from alumni we have to submit documents if we get accepted. What are these documents? Can I send certified true copies of the transcripts and diploma because I need the original copies for the visa? Yes, you do need to submit documents. So after you submit your application to Euroculture, you also still have to do multiple administrative processes to get started in Europe. So you need to... We will help you to make sure that you do all these things, but you still have to do them yourself. So you need to apply for a visa. You need to get registered with the university of your choice. You need to apply for housing. You don't need to apply for insurance because that's going to be given to you through the program. And of course, you need to do some administration related to the scholarship. So for example, we need some statements from you afterwards, but we will explain all of that down the road. I don't want to worry you with that too much. We'll go through it step by step, so you're not suddenly overwhelmed with a million different things to do. But during the application process with the university of your choice, you will need to verify your educational background with them as well. And in some universities, that process can be quite strict and demanding. So, but as far as I know, it's always possible to send certified, notarized copies of documents to all universities. So that's always a legal possibility. So yes, if you need the originals for the visa, you should be able to send certified copies. That's fine. We will give you more information on how to do that once you're accepted into the program, and once we know what the steps are going to be. Joska, how many students are selected for each geographical region? That's a good question. So there's limits on that as well. So to ensure diversity, it means we have to target students from a list of different regions, but we also cannot recruit, let's say, 10 students from, let's say, Germany. I don't know, any country. There is a limit on the number of students we can recruit from each country. So we need to be, and that important note here, this only applies to the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. So for the self-financing application, your nationality becomes not important anymore. As long as you're eligible, as long as you're interested in joining, you can always join regardless of your nationality. But for the scholarship, we have to keep this criteria in mind. So that's just something to keep in mind. So how many students from a particular region? Usually up to 2 or 3 per region is what you can expect. Yeah, that's more or less the limit. But usually we don't have to do a lot of work here a lot of the time, because we get students from so many different countries, and the balances just kind of naturally sorts itself out quite a lot of the time. So we don't have to intervene a lot in that process most of the time. Mohammed Ramazan, I wasn't able to upload my passport in PDF format. I sent only one side of it. Okay, what you can try to do, if you still want to make sure that it's also uploaded in PDF, is you can, usually on the internet there's a lot of free convert PNG to PDF tools. That's something that you can try to use. Another way of doing it might be converting it through your university. They might have software available to them. A lot of university libraries have software licenses, for example, for Adobe or other kinds of tools that allow you to convert documents from one type to another. So that's kind of a way you might be able to solve that problem. What structure are we expected to provide when writing the list of courses we've studied what we consider relevant to Euroculture? That's up to you. Also, because it's a personal question, what courses do you consider to be relevant is, we're interested in that section. You might say we're interested in seeing how clearly you see the links between what you did in your bachelor's and in Euroculture. So it's kind of up to you to determine that structure. Generally speaking, of course, the best way to go is looking at your course list and saying, well, this course relates to what we're going to be doing here. This course is relevant to semester 2. This course is relevant to semester 3, or this course is relevant to something I want to write about in a paper, or what I want to do in my thesis. So it's kind of up to you to make the evaluation of what courses are relevant. But of course, separately from that, we also make a determination based on your transcript of records to verify your background. So we formally check whether you meet the required criteria to join our program. But relevance is also established by you in part as well. Badr Mac, hi Jelmer. First of all, Happy New Year's. Happy New Year's to all of you too. Just a few final confirmations on a few points. I encountered a technical issue while using Chrome. Every time I click on Save Progress, the screen displays processing form entries. One moment, please, and nothing happens. Okay, so first of all, if that happens, try reloading, so refreshing the page and checking if the document's uploaded or not, because if you go to the page on our website, so I'm gonna just link that here. I think I can reply to this specific message? No. Okay. So if you go to this page here, the online application tool page, there is one stuck on processing form entries. So what I want to say, what it says there, the page is not actually stuck, but simply does not redirect you anywhere after its work is finished. You can try to close the page and reload the tool, and you should find most of the time that your responses were stored. If that's not the case, let me know. But from what I gather, from what I've seen over the last couple of months, this is usually the case. So if you just reload the form and it shows that the documents are there, then it's there. It should also be noted that after you applied, you can still log in and just check what you actually submitted. So once you submitted your form, it doesn't disappear. So you can still just see, what did I upload here? What did I upload there? You can just double check. So that's something you can always check if you feel worried about a particular document not being there, or shoot, did I upload this or this or this? You can always just check by logging into the tool again. Okay, so that's for the first one. Okay, if it worked on the second attempt, that's fine. Successful. What kind of stamps do the professors need to put on it? Is it a dry seal? If there's no stamp, whatever stamp is available at the university, we don't really differentiate too much between different kinds of stamps. If your university doesn't generally use stamps for reference letters, then you don't have to provide them. We just want to make sure that the letter is written in accordance with the standards set by your bachelor level university for how a reference letter should look like, because this is very different everywhere. Okay, now my question is, could this technical issue potentially impact my application? I don't know. This is the first year we're using this tool. However, the solution that I just mentioned works. So you can just check, after you submit it, you can just check what was submitted in each category. And if there is a document there, then it should be fine. Yeah. Okay, so that also goes to what Maheen Zaib said as well. Yosra, I heard that you worked on the new version of the website. I wanted to say thank you so much for the good work, because the information is much clearer now. That's wonderful feedback. I love to hear that, because yes, especially presenting the information was also because I do these sessions. I was quite involved in that process, so I'm very happy to hear that. So thank you so much for the good feedback. That's great news. When I log in again, my progress is already saved, but whenever I try to save the details, I get the notification that your session was lost. Okay. Good feedback to have is that we need to maybe take a look at maybe giving more detailed feedback on what actually happens when you get these error messages. But yeah, that's the only check I can give you right now, is try to reopen the tool and see if the documents are there. Just create a new session. That's the only real advice I can give you, unfortunately. We might be able to iterate on this next year, but that's all I can give you now. But it should work. I've seen a lot of applications already that look to be completely fine with all the different categories of documents submitted in good order. So it should be possible to submit a good application. Yes, so good to note, maybe different browsers work. We were using this tool for the first year. I was actually partly responsible for designing that one as well. So okay, glad to know that with a different browser it works. Well, try to experiment with it a little bit, and if you really struggle with something and there's really like a technical issue that can be fixed, just let me know, and hopefully I can get back to you about that. So Yosra, oh good that Olomouc is your first pick. If you go there, I think you'll find that you'll have a good time there. Interestingly, if you go to the mobility overview on the website, I will just send you that link here. Do note that we also actually give an indication of projected living costs at each university. It's not definitive. It's not like prices change all the time, so it's very tough to give you good information that is super relevant. But based on what we hear from students every semester, this is more or less what they expect to spend on monthly costs everywhere. So Olomouc is quite a bit cheaper. And here's a fun thing to know. Any of the scholarship money that you don't use, it's yours, right? We don't take the money back if you don't spend it. So if you want to be frugal with your time in Euroculture, be my guest. Be our guest. Okay. My university does not really have a letterhead. Is that okay? Yes, that's fine. If your university doesn't have one, then so be it. If the signature is all that's available, then so be it. If the stamp is available, please put it on. That's all I can say. One more question. What about the subject of the reference letter? Does it need to contain just our name? Your application number is given to you after you submit your application. However, if you just make sure that the same name that you use in your application is also mentioned in the reference letter, that should work. We can type out your name, and then we should be able to link it to your application file. There is a part where we are supposed to upload a photo. Is it a formal photo, or does it need to be a photo from documents? So Isabel, this is a category that we will probably change next year because it's a little vague, I admit. Yes, so essentially right now we're asking you to upload your passport, just a scan of the document, and then also a separate category with just a photo from that passport. But next year, I think we might have to remove or change that category. Ideally, we would like you to upload the passport photo from the passport itself. So not an actual scan of just the photo, but rather like a full high quality version of that file. But if you have another picture that is just of you that you like, that's also fine. We just need to make sure that we have the passport scan. It's kind of an arbitrary category. I made my CV using the Europass format, and despite mentioning only the positions relevant to the program, it turned out to be 5 to 6 pages. That seemed too long, so I cut it down to 2. Now I'm not sure whether to submit the long one or the short one. What's the best choice, and how many pages are recommended for the application? There is no strict determination for what's right and wrong. If you really have 5 or 6 pages worth of relevant positions and experience, we won't stop you. However, of course, being focused is a skill, and being brief and summarizing effectively is also an important skill to have. So there is no right or wrong answer. It's whatever you think works best for your profile, because that's really what the application is about. It's about you presenting yourself in such a way that we can clearly see the fit for you in the program. And if you have a lot of relevant experience, then the CV is the best place to share it. Because of course you also have to write the motivation letter, which is limited by characters, whereas the CV is not. So you might also, for example, just say, okay, you know what, I'll upload the full long CV, and in my motivation letter I'll reference quickly to certain positions so I don't waste too much time on what's happening so I don't waste too many characters in the motivation letter. So I would say a long CV is fine if you use it strategically within the context of your application. Hope that answers your question. So yes, Boris, mine was about 3 pages. That's fine. A 3-page CV is perfectly fine in terms of length. I have a recommendation letter from my manager, but he only put the organizational email. Is that okay? He signed it and has a stamp. No, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. It doesn't matter. Isabella, will the choice of universities affect our selection? No, absolutely not. What happens is we look at the profile. We don't actually determine your eligibility for the program using the universities as a selection criteria. So what happens is, it is totally possible, it's never happened before, and we've run this program for 25 years, but it's never happened, but it's theoretically possible that everyone applies to Groningen first. Then we will not suddenly start prioritizing people who did apply to Göttingen. No, so there is no effect. There is no effect on the likelihood that you will receive the scholarship. However, what it might affect is where you go during your study. So if everyone wants to go to one place, then we will need to make sure that there is balance in the network. So that will mean that other people won't be able to go to Groningen. So that's the trade-off. Not everyone can go to the same place. That's essentially the argument. But no, there is no impact on your outcome for determining your eligibility. So in the selection process, it should be noted that the first choice university that you get will always take a look at your application. So they are included in the assessment procedure for your university. So, for example, if you chose Olomouc, Göttingen, and Udine, Olomouc will always be involved in looking at your application. However, to make sure that we don't get a problem of bias, because of course Olomouc likes you because they want you because you're coming to them. Of course, we have a randomized secondary assessor involved in the admissions process that will then also look at it to make sure that they're not being cheeky about their choices. So no, there is no real impact because we have checks and balances on who looks at the applications. However, the university that you are interested in will always be involved in the selection process for you. So in that sense, it's not entirely irrelevant. However, it shouldn't be super relevant in terms of your likelihood to get accepted, because there is random secondary assessment to make sure that we don't get bias. How hard is it to get accommodation, and do you start searching after you're accepted, or could you start now? Unis, in most universities, you need to have an acceptance into the program before you can apply for student housing. That's usually fine. How hard is it to get accommodation? In some places it's really difficult, and in some places it's really not difficult at all. I would say that Groningen and Göttingen are more difficult right now because they're quite busy. Also, living costs in Groningen are quite high, and the prices for accommodations are also quite high. And well, maybe some of you have heard about this, but the election outcomes here are not very favorable in the long term to the presence of international students. So there's some uncertainty. However, generally speaking, Euroculture students get a good deal with SSH, which is our student housing foundation in the city. Joint degree and double degree students, which Euroculture students are, get preferential treatment with them. So there is a housing crisis in Groningen, but for Euroculture students, it's actually not such a big problem as it would be for some other students. So if you can get SSH housing, you're actually in a pretty good spot housing-wise. You need to apply around May, so that's only after you've been accepted. So you don't need to start looking right now. Definitely wait until you have your result before you start looking, because otherwise you're just, potentially wasting time. What if you're not accepted, Once you're accepted, I would also refer you to the mobility page on our website. So on the mobility page, we do reference the main housing providers offered by each university. You might take a look at them if you're interested already, but you don't have to apply just yet. But you can start your research if you're wanting to plan ahead with these things. Okay, I think that's clear. If we pick the placement track for semester 3, do we have to do an internship in the same country as the university we're in for that semester? How does the mobility work with the internship? Thanks. That's a great question, Yusra. Essentially, no, you don't have to. You can do an internship in any country you like. However, if you need a visa, if you're a non-European citizen, which I suspect many of you here might be, then you do need to apply for a visa for that semester, and you need to apply for that visa through usually, for example, if it's in Brussels, you might need to go through the placement provider to get a placement, to get a visa. So that is a big administrative process that you will have to take. So my recommendation, generally speaking, is that you want to, for your third semester as a non-European student, the path that is generally easiest is to find a placement in the countries that you already have a visa for, because that just makes your life a bit easier. But it's not required. There's no program requirement. And there are non-European students that have done this, that have gone to other countries that they did not study in before to get their to get their placement. So you're not required to do anything, but it will be more challenging than going to a country you've already been. And generally speaking, of course, you would say it makes sense that you are interested in the countries that you're going to be studying in, so maybe it's also relevant for a placement there as well. How does the mobility work with the internship? Well, you have to find so the third semester, you're really just independently going to have to find your own housing, find your own find your own placement there, find your own role. There is a supervision process with the university with semi-regular sort of check-in moments. So you're not left entirely alone, and we give you some support, but the responsibility for doing all these tasks eventually lies with you as the student. So that's something to keep in mind. Do you also accept Bachelor's of Science for communication majors instead of a Bachelor's of Arts? So, Andre, that's a good question, and it kind of goes back to what I mentioned during the starting phase of the presentation, if you were there. I would say probably yes. Probably yes. But it also depends on what was taught in your Bachelor's of Communication. So there can be, in some cases, a big difference between how those courses are taught, what kinds of modules are taught, what kind of skills you've learned during your bachelor's. We need to determine that can only really be done once we see everything come together, your transcript, your motivation letter, your CV, we see all these documents. That's really when we can determine, okay, so we see on the transcript, we see courses A, B, and C, and these overlap with what they need to learn to be able to join Euroculture, etc., etc. So it's hard to say. In principle, I wouldn't say no. But the word bachelor. So in theory, if you have a BSS, so a Bachelor of Science, you can still theoretically join if the background is there. So that's really the question: is the background there? Can we see the courses that you do? Can we see that you have the relevant skills from one of the relevant backgrounds? That's the main question. What about the job market in Poland and the Czech Republic or Czechia? Good question. I don't really know. I'm not from those places. I can't really say. The best thing you can do in those cases is let me see, community contact. So best thing you can do is what I just posted in the chat right now. On the contact page, you can plan. You can just reach out by email to the relevant coordinators and just check about the job markets there. Generally speaking, living costs in the Czech Republic are lower, but there is also the matter of purchasing power there. So their living costs are lower, but their salaries are comparatively lower to other EU countries around them. So, for example, your living costs in the Netherlands would be higher, but your salary would also be higher. So if you come with a Dutch salary to the Czech Republic, things are very cheap. But if you come with a Czech salary to the Czech Republic, then things are as they are. So that's just the economic question of like purchasing power and how those things relate. But I don't know the job market specifically for internationals in those contexts. I don't know. However, Saleh Ayub, my question is regarding Pakistan. How many alumni do you have from Pakistan? We have students from Pakistan fairly regularly. I don't think we have any students from Pakistan in Groningen right now. We have a student from Bangladesh, India. Sorry, it's difficult to say. But yes, students from Pakistan do get into the program. And we do have alumni from there. But of course, you have to account here for the geographical diversity criterion as well. So there would usually only be a couple, because unfortunately we don't see a lot of self-financing students from Pakistan because the program is generally quite expensive if we're talking about relative purchasing power Salaries in Pakistan are generally lower than in the EU, so as a result, it's usually quite expensive for them to study in Europe on their own money. So we don't see a lot of self-financing Pakistani students. But for the scholarship, yes, we do see students from Pakistan making it into the program. I can't give you exact numbers, unfortunately. I don't have those. Let's see, where are we? Hello, the earliest I can get the IELTS certificate is the week of 22nd of January. Would it still be possible for me to apply for the scholarship if I present all the other required documents now? At this point, Elena, I'm honestly, I'm not sure. You have to write an email. I think we need to request an exemption, but the problem is we're very close to the deadline at this point. Exemptions need to be requested before the January 10 deadline, and then they need to be granted. So I'm a little worried, to be honest. So no, we have to be very strict about having the complete file ready by January 10. There are some very, very rare cases where we've granted an exemption. For example, a student that said, hey, well, my language test is going to be ready on January 11. Can I please? Okay, and in those cases, we've sometimes said, maybe, but generally we don't really provide those kinds of exceptions. So I'm worried, personally. You can write an email and we can write to the admissions board and see if we can get an exemption, but usually speaking, I would say at this point, also because we're so close to the deadline, that it's going to probably be a problem. Yeah. Second question, is the next application period next year or only in 2026? So, Elena, second question, is the next application period next year or only in 2026? Elena, that's an excellent question. So this is the final intake for this iteration of the Erasmus Mundus project for Euroculture. We have now confirmation from the European Commission that next year we cannot offer scholarships. So there has to be a gap of 1 year before we are allowed to offer scholarships again. That wasn't confirmed until very recently. But essentially, this means that next year there will be no intake for the Erasmus Mundus scholarship. If Euroculture manages to renew its Erasmus Mundus status, which is a matter of depending on whether we succeed in our own application process with the European Commission, we have good hopes about this, also because, like I said, we are a well-established program. We still managed to attract quite a lot of students, a lot of applicants, so I'm hoping we will get renewed. But essentially, next year there will be no scholarships, and the year after that, hopefully, that's what we expect. And then they will also be falling under the new framework of EMJM, which offer slightly different conditions that I would say overall are better for you. So the scholarships, once we get them back again, will be of higher quality in terms of how they are structured financially for you. Second question. Okay, so yes. If we're in the University of Deusto for the second and fourth semesters, can we find an internship in Spain as well? Yes, you can. That's possible. Because the internship is always supervised by the first university of your choice. So that's possible. Yep, no problem. Have you had any alumni from Sub-Saharan Africa? Yes, absolutely. Yes, we get many applicants from the region, and also usually we have one or two, as with the same geographical diversity limit, those slots from Sub-Saharan Africa usually fill up well, yes. But again, for self-financing students, it's the same question as with Pakistan, is that we tend to see that students from Africa will not be able to support themselves financially in Europe very easily unless they come from very wealthy or affluent backgrounds. So, which varies sometimes. It happens sometimes, but of course, you don't always get that. And many people don't have this. So we don't see a lot of self-financing applications from Africa that succeed because of the financial constraints. So this is also something, Euroculture, this is something that I want to also, we try to communicate this more clearly since also the last couple of years, because Euroculture has been, especially by some applicants that didn't succeed in the past, they've accused us of racial bias in the selection procedure, but that's not something that it's also, and then they referred, for example, to group pictures and saying, well, does it look like this group is so diverse? And then we say, well, yes. But it's also a matter of financing. Not everyone is a scholarship holder. Most of our students are not scholarship holders. They have to finance their own studies. And there are just geographical imbalances in how easily people are able to finance a quite comparatively expensive program. So it's not a matter of our selection criteria, it's a matter of finances and practicalities that prevent many students from joining Euroculture. So we are in fact, diversity and these kinds of criteria are built into the selection procedure very thoroughly. So I wouldn't say that there is an element of racial bias that plays into why Euroculture students are selected or not. But yes, absolutely, where the students from Africa that we've had in the past, they perform well, so there's no problem. The Middle East, it's the same. It's the same, really. So yes, maybe just to give you more of a detailed breakdown. So usually, in an ideal scenario, Euroculture would attract approximately 100 students every year. 75% of those students would be self-financing and 25% of them would be scholarship holders. So that's only 25% of people with a scholarship. So 75% of those students need to finance their own studies. There are some that are able to afford this, but many are not able to come from outside the EU and get charged non-European tuition fees. So what you see is naturally a lot of the self-financing population of students is often made up of European nationals. That's really not to do with race, it's to do with financing and who is able to study a European studies program in Europe. Well, Europeans are more able to afford that a lot of the time. So how about Ghana? It's the same. I would say it's the same story. It's we have Ghanese students. Yes, checking to see if we have one this year. I need to think about that, but definitely we've had students from the region. Okay, successful. I have researched about practicality mobility for students who have disabilities and have only seen one university that offers assistance for that. I hope this wouldn't be a hindrance. No. We don't discriminate based on disability. However, it is something that is good for us to know in advance of the program. So I'm not sure if we still have that question in. I think we do. If you have any special needs, we do like to ask for that. Also, because sometimes it can impact, let's say, the overall picture of the application. So for example, this is an interesting one. We had a student that was partially or almost fully blind. Then we do want to ask some questions about that. How does that work? How do you see that working with your mobility? Do you have a caretaker? How do you manage independently in those cases? Because Euroculture is a program that comes with a lot of additional administrative and practical burdens. We want to think carefully about how that is going to work, and we want to think along with the student about those kinds of issues, but we need to know. So that's the reason. What about the Middle East? I think I answered that question already. Can you tell us a bit about the University of Deusto if you can? I can't tell you much from practical experience. As some of you might know, I am a Euroculture alumnus myself, so I've studied the program. I know what it's like to study this program. I haven't studied it in Deusto, though. I was in Groningen and Göttingen, but I've been to Deusto. It's a wonderful city. It's very colorful. The student community there is very active. So it's a wonderful city to be around. It's actually fairly affordable. The student housing as well is quite cheap and quite easy to get, especially if you're comparing it to countries like the Netherlands, where I'm from. Those places are very expensive and difficult compared to Deusto. Although, of course, in the Netherlands for Euroculture students it's also doable, but for the average student here it can be quite challenging. In terms of courses, I can't really tell you too many specifics. I know the coordinator there, Maite. She's great. She's very nice. She's very helpful. So I'm sorry I can't give you too many details. However, you can just contact Maite. So I think the contact page I just mentioned has her email address. You can just contact her. So if you have questions about the program there, she might be able to give you some more information. So what about Strasbourg? That's kind of the same story because I didn't study there. Again, it's a wonderful city, very colorful, very active student life. Accommodation is very easy, very cheap to get. So practically speaking, you can just apply. And in fact, from what I gathered from last semester's group, so this is quite recent information, you can actually just pick and choose. Like there's a lot of options in terms of housing, so that's very practical. You can apply through the university very easily. I would say that in Strasbourg, one thing to keep in mind is that knowledge of French is recommended. Compared to many other places in Europe, the English level of the average French people can be a bit lower. So if you don't speak any French, you might struggle a little bit more in day-to-day interactions. However, the university does offer a lot of language courses to help you get up to some basic level of understanding of French. So what we generally recommend is that if you go to Strasbourg is that you have a basic level of French. You don't need it for the courses, mind you. You just need it to survive in the university system and the everyday environment. But if you know French, then your life there will be quite easy. Of course, there's also quite a lot of international students in Strasbourg. So also in terms of student interaction, you should be fine. But for some everyday things and administrative things, it might be useful to speak a bit of French. Isabella, how strict is the assessment process? I mean, if you're referring to the selection procedure, it's difficult to say because one thing that we can be quite strict about is if you go to the how to apply page, we have a section called the admissions criteria. So we distinguish between the primary and the secondary assessment criteria. If you don't meet any of the primary assessment criteria, so if any of the things on the list is not met, then you are out immediately. So that's something to keep in mind. Is we have to deal with quite a number of applicants, so that also means that we can't waste, unfortunately, time on an application that is not going to succeed. So we can be quite strict about some things. We're also, and maybe this surprises some people, we are very strict about the language test, very strict. So if one of the first things that we do is if we see the language test is not good, the entire application goes. So this is something that you need to be quite careful about in the application. If you submitted an application with a language test that's not there or not quite there, then I can tell you with a high degree of certainty that your application will be rejected. So on those formal criteria, we are very strict, and that's also just to protect our own time. But after that stage, after we've established that all the basic criteria are met, then it becomes a much more free and fluent discussion. I can disclose, we do have a scoring system that is used to compare results, and that's how the ranking is established, but I will not disclose the exact details of that because that's confidential to the admissions board. But yes, what I would do is make sure that you go to our website and make sure that you have all the documents that you need, and make sure that you meet all the primary assessment criteria, or admissions criteria we call them. So the secondary admissions criteria is a different list, and those are not necessarily optional per se, but rather it's not such a big problem if you don't have a thing on that list. So you don't have to have work or study experience abroad, but it helps. That's the way to look at this list of things. These are just things that are helpful for your application to have, and that we do take into consideration. And those things are all scored as well and given a number of points weighted in a particular way. Maybe a good tip that I can give you is don't underestimate the importance of the motivation letter. This is something that I really want to stress here. Is the motivation letter is actually quite, I guess it's an admissions board secret, but the motivation letter is quite heavily weighed. So it is actually quite an important part of your application to write a good, personalized, sensible motivation letter for the program. So really make sure that you think about how you want to work that motivation letter in. So that's just something. Okay, and that actually ties into Naren's question. Should the motivation letter be more profession-based? If so, would that be a good thing? I think I should explain a little bit. The motivation letter, what we want to see in the motivation letter is essentially an answer to the question, why does it make sense for you to study Euroculture? That's the question that we essentially want answered. You don't have to actually talk a lot about all your different experiences and all the things that you've done, although they are important. Because you have the CV to talk about all your experiences, right? The CV is the place where you can put all your work experience and put all your educational experience and all the summer schools and projects and everything you have ever done in your life. Those things you can tailor in the CV. In the motivation letter, I guess what we want to see is we want to see you tell the story of how you came to Euroculture, and why you think it's relevant based on what you've done in the past, based on what you want to do in the program, and also based on what you're going to do in the future with the program. So maybe this is a good thing. Yeah, I'm sorry, we don't really timestamp those sessions, but last Q&A session, if you were there, we had a current Euroculture student, an alumnus, and also an Erasmus Mundus scholarship holder. We had her on the stream as well, and she talked a bit also about how she wrote her motivation letter. So if you're really interested in hearing how she approached it, and because it worked for her, you can go back to last session. That's session number 2 with Anfield is her name. So if you're interested in hearing her process, but the summary of what she said there was essentially that you need to tell a story that incorporates your past experience, what you want to do in the program and how you think the program is relevant, and also what do you want to do after Euroculture. Show knowledge of the program, show that you understand how the program works, maybe refer to specific courses or people that you want to work with. Like the more knowledge you show of the program, the better your letter will be. And this is also interesting because these are things that cannot be faked by ChatGPT. We understand that you might want to use ChatGPT as a proofreader, but make sure that you actually think carefully about these questions, because ChatGPT might be able to tell you some things about Euroculture, but its information cuts off at the last intake and is outdated and sometimes incorrect. So there are some interesting factoids about Euroculture that it gets wrong, and we can tell that very clearly. So if you write a motivation letter make sure that you think about the questions and maybe let AI help you in formulating the best way of saying those things, but don't let it write for you, because it will be wrong. It will hallucinate things that aren't there. It will, for example, say that we are a program about legal studies. We are not training lawyers. So that's just something to keep in mind. So professions based, I would say probably not, because the CV is really where you want to focus on that particular element. The CV is where you show us your professional experiences. The motivation letter is where you explain why those professional experiences led you to this program. So why this? Based on the fact that you've done this, this, and this, why do Euroculture? That's really the question you should be coming back to, is why study this program? What do I want to do with it after I'm done? Like, how will this program help me? These are useful questions to ask yourself anyway. And they're also very good to put in a motivation letter, because it shows that you thought about it. It shows that you know what's going on. Andre, are you a part of the selection board? I'm involved in the selection process, but I'm not involved in the actual board. So what that means is I don't grade your applications. I don't give scores for your motivation letters, but I've seen a lot of applications. At this point, I've seen thousands of them, so I have a couple of ideas about what works and what doesn't work. So I wouldn't say, anything I say is anecdotal based on my experience, and I'm not a representative of the Euroculture Admissions Board. However, I know a few things about it, so my opinion is not entirely irrelevant, I would say. And I am involved in the practicalities of the selection process. So I manage the procedure, I manage the online application tool. So if there's things about the tool that you think need to change, then I'm the person to go to anyway. So I'm involved in the process at various stages, but I'm not actually going to sit down and grade your applications. That's going to be seasoned academics as opposed to me. Joshua, would it be advisable to mention in my application that I have received a scholarship during my bachelor studies for a semester in China, but was unable to go due to family reasons? Yes, I mean, I would definitely say that you mention it. It's a good thing. It shows, of course, that you've, received that credential. Even though you couldn't go, you can explain that if you want, so that's fine. Yeah, I would say that's worth mentioning, absolutely. Naren, yes, because I talked about an experience, what I discovered, and how the program will help me to. Yes, these are the right questions to ask. So, how will the program help me do this? What are the skills that I'm going to be learning? So, Euroculture is, and that's also, this is another, Euroculture, we like to talk about skills-based learning. So, what skills do you want to learn? What, for example, a professional organization, you could say, oh, I really want to hone my presentation skills. I want to be able to present academic work better in this, and this way. Or if you have anecdotes or things that relate to that, that's very relevant. Is there anywhere we can read about faculty members or lecturers, professors who teach in the Euroculture Consortium? Joshua, that's a good question. So essentially, there's not one centralized piece of information. This is also something that I would have found interesting when I was a student. That's not really provided. This is mostly for data security reasons, but also for another reason is some lecturers and people are very Naren, that's good. Then you're on the right track, I would say. I haven't read your letter, obviously, but if what you're saying is true, then I think you're on the right track. So the faculty members of Euroculture, many of them are involved in a formal capacity and have a formal role. But there are also quite a few lecturers that might teach one course of Euroculture, but are otherwise not so directly involved. And it's also structured very differently at every university. So in Groningen, we have quite a strong core team of people that are very involved in the program, also because we organize the management of the network. But in other places, there is maybe the coordinator, the director, and one or two lecturers that are very intimately familiar. And then there's a lot of other lecturers that are only tangentially or sort of indirectly related to the program. So when do you become a Euroculture lecturer per se? That's not always clear. But however, once you come to the university, we will give you a booklet, for example, here in Groningen, with all the names and faces and addresses of the, well, office addresses, obviously, of the lecturers. So we give you that information so you know who you're going to be working with. The best thing I would advise you is, if you want to learn more about who's working with Euroculture at a particular university, start by asking the coordinator at that university. So I can tell you for Groningen, I can tell you for Göttingen, because I studied there and I know the team a bit. But it's always best to ask them directly, but also because lectures change. Maybe one course is taught 1 year by this person and then the next year by another person. And maybe the courses change. So, you know, these are things to... Okay, so that's I guess the answer to that question. Is there any way? No. So yeah, are AI-aided motivation letters completely rejected? No. AI-rejected motivation letters are not rejected. Motivation letters that do not address us or make mistakes or are inaccurate, those are rejected. So what I'm trying to say is, I will understand. Obviously, with the advent of AI, we all know here there is no tool to detect AI right now that is reliable. So we do not have the resources to make the determination as to whether a letter is AI written. So I cannot say that AI motivate. We don't take an official position on it in that sense, because there is no way of telling with certainty. However, there are ways in which we might see that, for example, a letter is not accurate, a letter is not written to address the right people, it's not written to address Euroculture, it contains outdated information, it isn't very specific, because, for example, AI doesn't know your life experiences, and those are relevant to the motivation letter, so it can't put them in. So another way that we can tell that a letter might be written by AI is that it doesn't talk about you at all, because it doesn't know you. So these are the way, and of course we think that's relevant, so it's not necessarily... what I'm trying to say is AI letters are not forbidden, they are usually just not very good. That's maybe a better way of... So I would just recommend, if you use AI, that you use it carefully, maybe as a kind of proofreading tool. It's not forbidden. It's not forbidden at all. It might be a good way of making sure that you don't make spelling mistakes, or that you formulate your sentences, that it flows a bit better. I can understand that that's something that you might want to do, and that makes sense, but it can't do all the work for you, because it will not do a very good job. That's essentially my point. Hope that's clear. Eunice, I'm sorry. I don't think I've gone through your application yet. No, no. Sorry, I can't say. I'm sure it will be great. Don't worry. Okay, so from what Jelmer has said so far regarding the motivation letters, I understand that there is no real perfect way of addressing the motivation letter. That's exactly right. That's Boris. That's a great addition. That's a good point to add. And just to restate, yes, the application, the motivation letter is never perfect. There's no perfect way of doing it. There are just good practices and things that help, because everyone's story is different, and what works for one person might not work for another. it's all a matter of framing and putting it in the perspective that makes it useful based on what you've done. Yes. Okay, I seem to see that we've run out of questions for the moment. That's good. We're up to date. Well, we still have 10 minutes. I don't want to leave those empty. Let's see. Is there anything that you want me to talk about? Is there anything that you want me to elaborate on further? Now that you still have me, because of course in 10 minutes this is the last time we're doing one of these Q&A sessions for this intake. So afterwards you can only get feedback from us in writing. So that's something to keep in mind. I will just wait for a moment here. Relax my jaws for a second. Been talking for a lot. Okay, good. I see a few more questions come in. So yeah, so the great, yeah. So the results release. So the results usually around mid-March. It depends a little bit. So so usually yes, the results we try to get them out by early or middle March, but it also just depends on the number of applications. And so far, it seems this year that we're receiving quite a few. So it might be the case that it will be middle March. Yeah, we'll try to get it out as quickly as possible, but it's a long selection procedure. We have to go through a lot of people. So no guarantees, but we try to do it by mid-March at the latest. Yeah, so I think that's also once you submit your application, we give you a confirmation that also says this, but yeah. Should we put our transcripts in one PDF? Yes. Joska, please do. I understand that in some academic cultures it's customary to give you a transcript for every year. In the Netherlands, you get one transcript that is just updated to include more courses. That's kind of the format that we generally use. So yes, there is only one upload slot for the transcript, so I would just combine the PDFs into one if you can, because otherwise you won't be able to upload everything. And you do need to upload a complete transcript, otherwise application won't be accepted. Yeah. Yeah, Eunice, I hope to see you. I hope to see you as well. That would be nice, I think. Well, you are all being very kind today. That's very heartwarming. Thank you. Of course, you're very welcome for this. You know, it makes my life easier and it makes your life easier if we can just do this in person. Can I put the ticket for the conferences that I attend, because they didn't give me a certificate of participation? So Naren, generally speaking, if you want to provide certificates of participation, that's wonderful, but we don't actually request them. So you can what you can do is, like with the transcript question, you can combine all your certificates into one PDF and maybe add them to a document or something. But we don't actually request certificates of participation for all of the conferences that you've been to. So you don't, we're in that sense, we're not as strict as the European institutions who do in fact require that you upload a certificate of participation or some diploma for every single little activity that you do. For us, that's not the case. Will my recommenders receive a notification instruction where they will send the recommendation letter? Will they be notified as soon as I submit my application in the portal? Yes. As soon as you submit your application in the portal, an automated message is sent to the supervisor. That automated message is sent. Do note, though, of course, that the reference letter should actually, and this is maybe a little bit stressful, but the letter should also be in by January 10. So that's something to keep in mind. Is I would write to your supervisors right now and maybe ask them to prepare the letter as soon as possible, so we have them by January 10, and all you need to do is just submit, and then they get the email, and then you can reply to it right away. Because we're quite close to the deadline now. It's only 2 days, and that everything, including the reference letters, needs to be in by January 10. And you don't want it to fail because your supervisor didn't send you the letter in time. So ideally, get that done as soon as possible. That's my advice. Okay, good. I will, Elena, I will try to get back to you, but of course it's just been a holiday, so I have a lot of emails to get back to. So I hope to get back to you as soon as possible. Badr, concerning the transcripts, I put the original ones and their translation all in one PDF, and that's 6 pages. Is this a good way to present them? That's fine. That's perfect. Yeah, no problem. Naren, well, you're welcome. You're amazing. Iman, is it something like a motivational letter with research statement? It is given preference. I'm sorry. I think what you're trying to ask me is a research statement required as part of the motivation letter? No. I would say it's good to mention what you want to research. So it could say maybe as part of it, but you don't have to be. You don't have to submit, let's say, like a research proposal or something as part of the motivation letter. The motivation letter is more generally about you as a person, and based on why, based on my personal and professional experiences, should I be chosen to study this program with a scholarship? Why should I be chosen to study Euroculture? Why should I be selected? Based on what I've done so far. I've done this, this, and this. This means that I'm eligible because this is what I want to do in the future, and I think Euroculture can help me do that. These are the kinds of questions that you primarily want to focus on, and that can include your research, absolutely, but it shouldn't be the primary focus. Also, I've submitted the recommendation letters myself. Will referees be contacted through email? If you've already submitted the letters, they will not be contacted because there is no need, because we already have the letters. So some academic cultures forbid the disclosure of reference letters directly to the applicants. That's why we have this system. But if you can just upload, if the reference just send them to you directly, then of course that's much better. Then you can just upload them in the tool and you're done. So if you uploaded them yourself, they will not receive an email. They will only receive an email if you chose the option that they need to be sent by email. We generally prefer that the letters are just uploaded directly into the tool wherever available, but some references, some institutions, they don't allow reference letters to be sent directly. So that's why we have this system. All right. Are there any final questions? I should also note, and this is maybe good to keep an eye on, a lot of these questions might also be answered in our FAQ. They go into a lot of different elements that were discussed here today, and also some questions that might come up later. I should note that some of these answers are a little bit outdated, but the main gist still makes sense. I think there's a few answers that still refer to the old system, which is a very slightly different. But it shouldn't lead you wrong. It should maybe, yes, okay, now this all makes sense. I think it all still makes sense. Okay, final questions. Just compliments. I like those, but I cannot interact with them. Thank you for those. You are very kind. Oh yeah, before I go, we have the student-run magazine, the Euroculture. This is something that I keep wanting to get back to. Our students run this magazine. It is basically the best way of getting an idea of what our students are doing and what they're interested in and what they're thinking about. So let's see. They have gone into social media a lot more. It used to be really primarily like, let's say, a magazine that really published articles, but they've gone into social media a lot more with the recent years. So, but nevertheless, there are still articles being uploaded fairly regularly. I think the most recent one is actually from 2 days ago. So, Echoes of Ukraine, the unveiling of Kazakh national identity in the face of regional turmoil is the name of the article. These are things written by our students. They like reading, they like writing those things, they like reading those things. You should read and write there as well. Participate, that's fun. And it's also just a good way of getting to know the issues that our students are thinking about. I think with that, we're out of time for today. So again, thank you very much for your attention. I'm very glad to hear from all of you that you found this session helpful. Of course, the video on demand of this will stay up. I don't think I'll have the time to add like timestamps and everything. But if you have a question before the deadline, do note it's coming up very quickly. I hope I can get back to everyone if there are questions. Otherwise, try to find the answer through all the resources available. And I'm glad to hear that you like the FAQ, Boris. That's good. Glad to hear that. Thank you all. I wish you all a good start to 2024, and I wish you all great luck submitting your application. I wish we could get all of you a scholarship, but unfortunately, such is life. Sorry, Jasona, one question. Do you think a background in Chinese language and culture might be considered relevant? Yes, absolutely. Languages and literature are very relevant to Euroculture. We've had students, actually in my year, a couple of Chinese nationals who had a background in Chinese language and culture that wrote some very interesting papers on like world literature and let's say Western versus Eastern hegemony in the context of literature and literary tradition. So as you can tell, I'm a literature background student myself. So no, there's a lot of interesting stuff in that domain. And what we generally see is students with that kind of background, they will adopt a sort of comparative approach a lot of the time, although that runs into problems, but that's something for when you're in the program. But yes, that's totally fine. Happy New Year, everyone. Hope you get everything ready in time, and see you in the future. Good luck.